2022 has come and gone, and I have to say it was a really good year for video games. There were so many good games that came out, and there were so many games that I didn't even play that came out too. Like, this was a fantastic year in terms of video games, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Hello everyone, Kingdom Kid here with my top 10 games of 2022. Like I mentioned at the beginning, this was a fantastic year for video games, and I played a lot of them for sure. I played so many of them that this could have been a top 20 list if I really wanted it to. And there were so many games that I didn't even play that it could have been even a higher list too if I did play them. But I haven't played, I played at least 20, but at the same time, there's still so many that I even missed. But I'll talk about those in the other video that comes out after this, my honorable mentions video. But anyway, guys, if you are unfamiliar with how I run my top 10 games of top 10 games of a year, this is how I usually do it. Obviously, the game had to have released in the year that it, like I said right here, this is it's the year 2022. And the video game had to have released this year in 2022. I had to have beaten the game from start to finish, seeing the credits. And another thing is, remakes or remasters do not count. However, there are some exceptions to that. If it is a remaster or a re-release or a remake of a game that has never came to the West before, a la Type 0 a few years ago, then yes, it could be counted for this list. There's so many games to pick from. It was really hard to pick, what could be the last one, What could be the games that make this list? And like I said, it was a hard choice, but I was able to figure out what they were, and it took a while. The good news is there were a lot of games like these are for sure going to be on there, but the bad news is there were so many other games that were just so good that I had to be like, okay, which one did I like more? And I have to say, again, this is a list of games that I liked. This is a list of games that I enjoyed, and this is also my personal list. This has nothing to do with any type of grading or review or anything that these games have received. These are just my personal preferences, and at the end of the day, that's what this all is. So I hope you all enjoyed. So without further ado, here are my top 10 games of 2022. Number 10. Pokemon Legends Arceus and Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Now, technically, these are two different games. However, I feel like one had something good and lacked something else, while the other one was good at that something that the other one lacked and bad at the thing that the other one was good at. For me personally, with Pokemon Legends Arceus, I love the gameplay aspect of it. You just running around. It was definitely a beta for what would eventually go into Scarlet and Violet here. And it was good. You had a nice open air. You had open areas which were nice, decently sized, and you got ride Pokemon as well to help you traverse the areas eventually once you got advanced far enough in the story. And then, of course, the aspect of you just seeing Pokemon out in the wild, a little bit similar to how it was in Let's Go and, of course, in Sword and Shield, but this one was a little more different. I love the aspect that you can just sneak up on a Pokemon and try to catch it without sending a Pokemon out into battle. I thought that was a really cool aspect of it. And I love the whole actually having to catch Pokemon and show off their moves, do specific things with them. You have to give them a treat. You have to hit them with a stun ball or whatever to fill out your Pokedex in order to fill it out to get the entry. Because normally you just catch a Pokemon once and you're done, and it's like, oh, here it is. But for Arceus, you had to get 10 stamps or something like that, and you only get one stamp for catching it once, and then you get another stamp for catching 5 of them, and then you get another stamp for it evolving, get a stamp for it eating a snack or something along those lines. I really like that aspect of it. However, where this game lacked was in terms of story. The story was somewhat very basic in a way. It's somewhat of an isekai where you get teleported into the past and into what would eventually become the Sinnoh region. And it's not a bad story by any stretch of the imagination, but it's really just whatever at the end of the day of it. It's okay, yeah, that's pretty much it. You go rescue there's the two opposing clans, the Diamond Clan and the Pearl Clan, saying that their god is the right god. One worships Dialga, the other worships Palkia. when in all actuality, there's, Arceus, who's the one god, the one almighty Sinnoh is what they call their god, is the almighty Sinnoh. So it's really not bad. I do enjoy this game a lot. I'm honestly surprised that they did not announce like DLC for this. You thought that this would have been a perfect game for them to be like, oh yeah, we're going to put in a new area with more Pokemon and such. I also love the aspects of the alpha Pokemon. The alpha Pokemon are pretty interesting, and I do like that a lot. They're just much bigger and stronger than a normal Pokemon, and they're really cool if you go around and find, like, you can just go around and just explore. It's definitely a lot easier, too, to find shinies. There's a sound effect that makes it when they pop up, and it's just great. And I'm honestly surprised I found so many shinies in this game. I think I found, like, around 5 shinies without even, like, trying to find them. But yeah, you definitely want to get your Pokedex, at least get every single Pokemon that you could to get all their stats in order to be like, oh, you completed the entry. And of course, you do get a little extra bonus if you complete the entry 100%. But that's like a total, like, for Magikarps, like, you gotta, like, see it, you splash 100 times in order for it to fill out that aspect. And then you gotta catch, like, 50 Magikarps, stuff along that. So it takes a while to get all the aspects 100%. But I think it's still worth it in a way because you do get the shiny charm that way, which is nice. I haven't done that yet, but it's a pretty cool thing if you really want to strive for it. And then, of course, the final thing is you getting Arceus. And I'm sorry if it's a little spoiler, but this game came out in January, so it's a little spoiler if you guys haven't seen this already. But you do get Arceus. That's the whole premise of you catching Arceus. And it's really nice when you catch him because and the only way to catch him first is you need to have at least the entry of all the Pokemon beforehand, which is, I think, like, I don't know if it's like 400. I think it's around 200. Let's just say it's 200. So you need to have, like, the 199 Pokemon first. You need to have them check marked on the Pokedex. So you need to complete 10 stamps of it. And then you can finally go and try to catch Arceus, which is really cool. It's a really nice... the story is fine, like I said, but it's not as great as Scarlet and Violet's story. Scarlet's and Violet's story is very different, and I honestly love it. You don't have your cut and dry, do your 8 gyms, and here's the bad guy team that you'll be facing off to, or here's the main baddie thing, and then you go become the Pokemon champion, and it's over. That's basically the Pokemon. That's been the Pokemon story since Gen 1, basically. This one is a little different. It still has that, hey, here's the gym leaders, go face them, which I'm fine with, but there's nothing really else, like, surrounding it. It's like there's actually 3 separate stories, and I honestly love this. You have your gym leader story, your Victory Road story, then you have the Path of Legends where you are so you're going to a school. I should preference this before I talk about anything else. You're going to a school, and then they have their annual treasure hunt, which is like find whatever your treasure is, and there's many paths for it. One of your friends is a Pokemon champion, but a Pokemon champion is literally, it's not like a title that only one person can have. It's a title that anyone can have because it's the generic go do the 8 gyms. And then the one thing I do hate about the story is when you go to the Pokemon League, they have an assessment test. And it's like, what the fuck is this? So of course they ask, like, do you like Pokemon? They ask what your first starter was. They ask you which gym did you have the trouble with, and then, like, who was that gym leader, and, like, what did they learn, and what they specialize in. And you're like, what the fuck? How are you supposed to remember any of this stuff? I think that was the stupidest thing they could have ever done. I didn't fail it, but I would assume if you fail, like, get one question wrong, you have to redo the whole entire thing, which I think is ridiculous. And then you face the Elite Four, and then you face the Grand Champion, and then lo and behold, you become a Pokemon champion. So it's not bad. And then another thing too about the school is you don't really have to go to it, but you kind of do in a way. At least for one of the classes, if you want to go face some of the other legendaries that are there. You go to classes, and you have to go through classes. So you get like three regular classes, and then you have a midterm. Go to 3 more classes, then you have a final, and that's it. You do get a little reward for doing good in those quests, in those tests, but it's not really worth it. You get small candies, and only 5 of them, which only gives you a little bit of XP boost in Pokemon, so it's not great. So that's one story. Another story is the Path of Legends, where you're helping another classmate go and find these special herbs that help make, special, unique sandwiches. And by facing Titan Pokemon, which are just bigger versions of some Pokemon that run around. I actually really like this story too, because this one has really a nice, warming story. into it. So I think that was really good. And then the final one is the focus on the evil, quote unquote, the evil team. So it's Team Star in here. So they're just a group of delinquents and bullies and degenerates that are going around, being bad and such. But they're not really bad. They're not really a villain group, So you go around and try to dismantle Team Star. And I also really like this one too. This one had a heartwarming end as well. But then this is where it gets good, is once you beat all 3 of them, that's when they all come together and go into the main story and aspect there. I'm not going to spoil too much about that, but there is a crater in the center of the Paldea region called Area 0, which you travel there and have the great finale. And that's an honestly good finale. It's a really good story, like I said, and I think it is a good story. The gameplay, and of course some other glitch and graphical errors this one is it is straight up open world. There's only like one transition into it, so there's like technically like 3 areas. So you have the base area where you start, which is like lower area of the main city area. Well, not really the main city, but it's like the city where the school is. So you have that main area first, which is a decent size, and then you transition into the city, and then you can transition either to the left or the right of the city, but it basically circles around anyway. And then it's a big, nice open world. I do like that too. However, there is, like I said, the gameplay is the basic as Pokemon. You have to send Pokemon out in order to try to catch new Pokemon. You do see Pokemon out in the wild, which I think is really cool. However, I'm not a big fan of how it's like you can check which Pokemon could show up there on the map, but if they're not there all the time, so it's like a whole, you have to keep running back, running away, coming back, running away, just to see if you can get the Pokemon to spawn. So I don't really like that too much. It was a little simpler in Sword and Shield, and obviously in Arceus as well, to get them to show up better. But I just didn't like that, because you could be like, so you open up your map and you're like, oh hey, these Pokemon spawn here, but then you like go around to like where the icon is, it's like I don't see them. So, but then again, that's where sandwiches come into play. So sandwiches are basically kind of like the picnics or the camping the curry was in Sword and Shield. So you can make a sandwich that can increase your odds of running into a fire type Pokemon. You get more experience by fighting normal type Pokemon, all that stuff. So that's where sandwiches kind of do come into play for that as well. So that could be helpful as well. But some people ignore them. I know I really ignore them, and other people may not even know that they do that. But at the end of the day, I did like both Pokemon Legends Arceus and Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. That I was like, like I said, Scarlet and Violet had the good story, not so much good gameplay. Well, Arceus, I feel like, had good gameplay, but not so much of a good story. So I feel like that was really good. And it actually has me somewhat a little excited for hopefully Gen 10, where they maybe mix them both together in a way. It's like, hey, let's make a good story and good gameplay. And I hope they don't also run into any issues, with graphical issues, and obviously not as good as it looks. I thought Arceus was fine, and I was honestly surprised when they were announced Scarlet and Violet, because I'm like, okay, I did not expect that at all. I feel like Scarlet and Violet definitely deserved another year, and maybe it would have been much better than we had, but I digress, and that's all I'm going to say. Pokemon Arceus Legends, Arceus, and Pokemon Scarlet and Violet are my number 10 top 10 games of 2022. Number 9, Horizon Forbidden West. I honestly really like this game. It was fun and enjoyable. I think it really did ramp up how the first game played, and honestly, from coming off of playing the first game not too long before playing the second game, I actually had a good time with it. It continues on the story after the first game, following Aloy trying to find the Gaia backup, and she went through so many other places first, and now she's on her last look through it, and then she finally finds it and then learns how to properly go about trying to restore the world. It is really good. I am honestly surprised that it was so good. It looks so much better than the first game too, and I'm sure it looks better. Obviously, I played the PlayStation 5 version, but the PlayStation 5 version I'm pretty sure looked pretty good as well with the PlayStation 4 compared to the first two, because the first game came out in 2017, and then you had this one that came out in 2022. It looks great. So that's 5 years. That's a 5 years gap in between Game 1 and Game 2, which is very interesting. I can't remember if they had some kind of thing. Obviously, they had the DLC for the first game came out between the two, but I don't think they had anything else. Well, this one has, there's going to be a VR game coming out, And of course, we have the DLC for this coming out too, sometime in 2023, which I'm actually excited for that as well. Unfortunately, much like the first game, this game came out close to an even bigger release. In 2017, her first Horizon game came out fairly close to the release of The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. I think it was like a week before that game came out. And then this game, Horizon Forbidden West, came out a week before Elden Ring came out. So of course, a lot of people would be like, oh, which two am I going to play? Or I'm going to play Elden Ring. Or I'm going to play, just Elden Ring. Or I was like, I'm trying to run through as much as I can with Horizon Forbidden West before Elden Ring comes out. And then as soon as Elden Ring comes out, I'm dropping everything else. And then some people just completely forget about it. So it's really unfortunate that this game series has had that bad luck. I do love this game too. I honestly do. They improved. They had more weapons up your arsenal, which is really good. I feel like they definitely improved the combat. They improved some traversals. You're actually able to control more animals in different ways, which is great. Eventually, you do get a flying machine to use and fly around with. That's not until like way later. It's pretty much like the second to last mission where you get that. So a little bit of a spoiler warning for you guys there. But the story is actually really good too. Like I said, it continues on the story of Aloy trying to find out how to restore the guy a backup, and she runs into Silas again, and it's really good. The one thing I'm not really too keen about, and obviously the first game did it as well, but I feel like it didn't do it as like, it wasn't a big deal to it. The first game and this game end in such a way that's like, oh, there's definitely going to be it ends up in such a cliffhanger in a way. While the first game I feel like wasn't too big of a cliffhanger, this one definitely had a cliffhanger. It's definitely like, oh, I hope they make a third game now. While the first game was like, oh, it'd be really cool if they made a second game. Obviously I'm sure people wanted a second game anyway, so it's like, hey, you gotta restore the world. So now you got this one. I did like it. The story was good. Obviously all the new characters and the new area, of course, that you get to explore the Forbidden West, which you kind of like heard a little bit about before as you played through the first game and did some side stuff. You heard a little bit about the Forbidden West, but now that you actually get to explore it and meet all new people and learn about everything. And there's even like the big threat I haven't even talked about, like that there's like a new kind of, I can't even remember their names off the top of my head, and I'm sorry about that, but they had like the new threat came in, and it's like, oh, you're basically the villains here. They're basically like the Shadow Carja in the way, but they weren't the Shadow Carja. They were a much bigger deal than that. Still a good game. The story was really good too. I also really like that as well. And even like the new bad guys, they weren't as good as the Shadow Carja, because I mean you had Keith Silverstein as as the main villain's voice, which is really good. But in this game, it's like they were really basic. I feel like they're like, oh, we're just bad for the sake of being bad, kind of in a way. And yeah, they basically did want to destroy, the world type thing. So it's so hard to like really talk about them without spoiling too much. So they didn't come from Earth. I'm just gonna say that they didn't come from. Well, they came from Earth, but then so you learned that there was another plan of Zero Dawn. Not of Zero Dawn, but around the same time Zero Dawn, where this group of people decided to fly off go to a different planet. They just were going to leave Earth and go to a different planet. And those who are the bad guys are those people that did all that. So, there you go. I still like the game. I think the game was fine. The combat's great. All the new kind of side missions that you can do in there are fun as well. And yeah, and like I said, I'm actually super excited for the DLC, which is going to have us exploring Hollywood. And that's another thing too. So the Forbidden West is like the west side of the United States. I believe the Frozen Wilds in the first game was Montana, while in the Forbidden West you have Las Vegas, Nevada, I think a little bit of Texas as well, and some other northern states, like maybe Washington. I think Washington's there. I'm not entirely sure, but it might be. And then, of course, like I said, the Burning Sands, I think, is what the name of the DLC is going to be talked about California, which I'm actually very excited for that as well, because I did like this game. I'm definitely going to play. I got to play through it again on New Game Plus on the hard difficulty, so I can get basically every single trophy in here as well with obviously with the first game too. But I did enjoy this game, and I hope you guys enjoyed playing it or watching me live stream series of it as well, because it was a fun game, and I will cover the new DLC when it comes out. And like I said, it was a good. It also delved a little bit more into Aloy's character as well, which is something that I really loved. With some of her friends, she feels like she's the only one responsible, and you see this from her, since she's a clone of Elizabeth from the first game. You see that she basically wants to do everything on her own, not really rely on anyone's help. And yes, she was like, I don't want to involve you because, you don't really understand the whole thing, with the focus and all that stuff. You don't really fully understand it, but it's like, well, tell us, let us learn type thing. So it's one of those things that, like, she does slowly start to open up and start to help people. And then she meets a character that kind of gives her more of like goes more into depth for her. And she kind of explains Ross to this character, and it's really touching. And I did like how it ended too. So, and yeah, I'm excited to see what they're going to do in the future for it. Obviously, like I said, they'll have the Burning Sands DLC. I don't know how it's going to work. If it'll work similarly to how Horizon Forbidden West or Horizon Zero Dawn worked, where it's just kind of like an area. It's like, oh, here's an area with its own story. It has nothing to do with the main story at all, because that wasn't a continuation of the first game either. Like, it wasn't a little teaser like, oh, here's a little openness of what's going to happen afterwards. I think this is just going to be like, hey, you can now go to California and face look at this new other tribes of the people and such, and it has no bearing at all with the story, unless, of course, you do this first before the end of the story. Then maybe a character will show up at the end, like it did in Horizon Forbidden West. However, it's actually different, because how Forbidden West ends, it basically is like you can't replay the final mission unless you made a save beforehand. So I don't know how it's gonna work, but we'll see. But I'm excited, guys, and I hope you guys enjoyed playing this game. If you guys did too, and I did too, and I can't wait to see what they do. And hopefully, if they do release a third Horizon game, that it does not come out like a week before another big game like Dark Souls 4 or whatever afterwards. Because yeah, if they go 3 for 3, I'm like, I'm sorry, that's so shitty. I feel like if that does happen to them, they're like, all right, we are delaying our game, because yeah, I'm sorry, they'd have to. But yeah. But anyway, guys, that's why Horizon Forbidden West is my number 9 of my top 10 games of 2022. Number 8. AI The Somnium Files Nirvana Initiative. I honestly really like this game a lot. It's weird. It is the sequel to the first AI The Somnium Files game, but they also don't treat it that way as well. Obviously, there are some references. You literally get asked, one of the first questions you get asked when you start the game is, do you know about the first game, the Cyclops killing incident? Do you know about this? Which was the reference of the first game. And they're like, do you know this? And it's like, yes or no. If you say yes, obviously then they will reveal some spoilers that happened in the first game. I'm fine with this in a way, but also I'm like, why? It's like, this is technically AI The Somnium Files 2. You should be like, hey, obviously it will spoil the first game, so if you don't want to do that, you should play the first game too. I digress. I think it is kind of nice in a way that they do that, but at the same time, I feel like, why? I feel like it's unnecessary, but I digress. So this one actually follows two different, well, not two different, but it does follow two different characters than Konami Date from the first game. It follows Kurito Ryuki and Mizuki from the first game. Mizuki Date, since she's been formally adopted by Date. And they are investigating another series of murders of the half-body instance, where only half-bodies are showing up. It is actually very interesting, because you follow Ryuki's side first, which takes place 4 years before when Mizuki takes over. It is so interesting. The story is really good too. Obviously, you get introduced to, like I said, Ryuki, and of course, his new eyeball partner as well, Tama, which is really good. They're actually quite different in a way. Tama's kind of like a pervert in a way, while Ryuki is kind of like not really soft-spoken or really laid back in a way, but he's kind of like really focused on the job. He is really focused on the job. Like, he wants to be a good police officer. He actually has a nice little touching backstory that involves his brother. And of course, he's also kind of like the apprentice of Date in a way too, which is really a nice touch. And of course, you have the same characters coming back as well. You have Pewter, you have Boss, you have some of the side characters that came back as well from the first game, Iris and Ota. And then, of course, you got some new characters as well, which are very interesting as well. I actually like some of these side characters as well. The funny thing is, they had one of the characters from the first game, the mermaid that you meet, she's actually a little more important in this game. She's more of, she is Mizuki's friend alongside, Iris. And so she actually has a little bit more of a role in this game than she did in the first game. I mean, she was a witness to some of these half-body murders as well, which is really interesting too. Again, I actually really like that preference as well. So there's one half of body that shows up, and then the second half shows up on Mizuki's side. It's very interesting. So of course you have to play through all of Ryuki's side first, and then you go into Mizuki's side, and then it all ties together at the end. And I honestly really loved how that tied up together. I think that's probably one of the big strong points that they have of that too. And of course it has the same basic gameplay as the first game. You go into the Somnium and you go and look around. There's not that much fluff dialogue as it was before, which is pretty good. However, there are also some moments where characters are like, okay, this is dumb. Why are you not doing this thing? Which is clearly obvious. Or why are you doing this thing that's clearly not something you should be doing? You clearly should be doing the opposite of what you're doing. So they fall into those kind of tropes, but it's not as bad as the first game is. So I'm going to give them a nice little, all right, it wasn't as bad as the first game, so you're all right there. And then, of course, but they also have a little bit of a different gameplay aspect as well, in that you actually have some investigation scenes where you go around and investigate the crime scenes and such, and kind of like recreate this is this is what happened at the crime scene. I honestly love that as well. And of course, the music's really good in here too. A lot of the same tracks are from the first game, because you literally are visiting some old places from the first game too. I think there's like a total of 6 places that you visited almost every single time. And that's another thing too about this game too, is like they have you go around to all these locations to just for like, oh, you have to go to this location, even though it's like a 5-second thing, kind of just like to talk. It's not bad in any way, shape, or form, but I feel like it's definitely like, okay, you just put this in here in terms of padding. So it does have issues. I'm not going to say that this game does not have issues. This game does have issues. The dialogue is pretty good too. The writing's really good. Obviously, Mizuki is a lot. I like Mizuki a lot better as a protagonist. Not that there was anything bad with Date, but after a while, it got like, okay. It got a little much to say. But again, nothing wrong with Date. Date was a good protagonist, but Mizuki was a lot of people's just favorite character. I mean, she was my favorite character from the first game too. That sweet child, poor child, having to watch her parents die. Well, didn't watch them die, but like come across their dead bodies from the first game. Spoiler alert, sorry about that, but it's great. Mizuki is a great character, and all the new characters that they introduced in here too are really great, and I love them all. And of course, it ends the same way that the first game ends, with a big musical number. They actually had some more musical tracks in here too. Like in the first game, they only had like one I don't want to say musical track, but like one instance of like a live concert thing. In this one, they had like 3 instances of the same song, which wasn't as bad. And then they had another one with a different song. So it had like 2 separate songs, but you only heard like one of them like once or twice, and then the other one you heard like 3 or 4 times. So it was a bit much, but I did like. They weren't bad songs either. And just the twists and turns of this game too. If you thought that the twists and turns of the first game were something, then you need to play AI of the Somnium Files Nirvana Initiative, because the twists and turns of that game are something else. It's like, wow. Like you see that and you're like, you get to a moment where you're like, how the hell does this thing work? And then you literally just like, hey, just advance the dialogue like 2 more steps, and then you'll know why. And you're like, what the fuck? So it's all over the place, and I love it. I think it is a good story, a good continuation of this series. I honestly have no idea what they are gonna do for a third game, because if they do make a third game, they cannot do what they did with this game, in the fact like, hey, do you know about the Cyclops killing? There's like no chance in hell that they can ask that question in a third game, like, hey, do you know about the half-body killings? And if you say no, there's so much stuff that it basically revolves around you knowing about this game. So if there is a third game, I don't know. I hope they stick with Mizuki a little bit longer too, if they do make a third game. I would like Mizuki as well. And I hope that Ryuki stays around as well. They're a good team. They really work good. Of course, Date as well. They're all good characters. I just don't know how it would work if they introduced another character, to like be the protagonist. I mean, I definitely see somewhat of a way that they could introduce someone of a new character. Like, I can definitely see someone that was in this game be the protagonist of the third game. But I digress. I still enjoyed it a lot, and I think the music and the gameplay the gameplay definitely did improve a little bit. It wasn't as, it's basically a visual novel typed game with a little bit of like moving around and picking up clues and stuff like that. But with a little bit of the added of the investigation scenes into the actual crime scene, I think that really amped it up just a little bit for me. I did enjoy this as well, and you guys should definitely check this out if you're all at all interested. If you played the first game and liked it, then definitely play this one too. If you were like, oh, the first game's not bad, but it had issues like this, like, oh, just too much like perverted sexual scenes and Oda and all this stuff too. It's like, all right, I get that, but the second game is not so heavy on that stuff. It's actually a lot better and has a nice mix to it too. Obviously, there's still some of the old gags there too. The whole big-breasted secretary lady is still there too, and I honestly love that. The whole high school bit is there too, but it's a little bit different, and I like that too. There are some bits from the first game. There are actually some new bits in here too that are really good, so I really do recommend checking this game out if you are at all interested in it. But I highly recommend that you play the first game first, so then you can actually experience this game to, I feel like, the full extent that it has to offer. And make sure you pay attention to a lot of things that get revealed at the end, because there's a lot of stuff that happens, and like I said, twists and turns and everything is incredible. But that is why AI the Somnia Files Nirvana Initiative is my number 8 of top 10 games of 2022. Number 7, Kirby and the Forgotten Lands. I am honestly upset that I have this game as such a low number, but that just shows how many great games they were, in my opinion. Again, this is a list of my opinion. I love Kirby. Kirby is my favorite Nintendo character of all time, and the fact that Kirby is now like in a somewhat of a 3D plane instead of being a 2D side-scrolling or 3D side-scrolling like he was in the last game, I think this is a great hit. I love the Forgotten Lands so much. So how it starts off is, Kirby's just enjoying his day, then all of a sudden a portal shows up and starts sucking up all the inhabitants of Popstar, and they go to a different land and such. And of course, Kirby's just on an adventure to save his friends, save the world, and defeat some eldritch horror god. Just a typical day for our favorite little pink puffball. The gameplay of this is nothing different compared to any of the other Kirby games, except that, of course, it has the new Big Mouth mode, where Kirby can suck in like cars, boats, light bulbs, and all that stuff. And he actually he can become a car. He doesn't become a car. He's just controlling the car, controlling the light bulb, be able to turn it on, control some ring type thing where he puffs out some wind and such. So I honestly like that. I think that was a nice gameplay aspect of it. Of course, a lot of people are like, what the fuck is this when it got announced? But I think it works out well. It's not like the whole, that's the only way you transform such. It's only there for situational stuff, which I really like that. And of course, he has his regular copy abilities. However, it's a little bit different this time. So the whole premise of this game is you gotta go around, rescue some Waddle Dees, and there's a set number in every single level. It's a little bit of a pain to find some of them, but you do get little hints every now and then. And if you complete a level without learning how to rescue a Waddle Dee, it'll give you hey, if you complete a level and you're still missing 3 Waddle Dees and you have no idea how, it'll reveal one of those to you. So then you can just replay the level again and do that again and such. It's really interesting. I like that. So after the first introduction level, you kind of get a whole, hey, here's a hub world in a way where it's Waddle Dee Village. There's a village you can go, and you have a lone little house there. You can rest there, get some snacks. You can watch. You can do some mini games in this area. There's a shop eventually. This all happens after you rescue a certain amount of Waddle Dees. And you go around, have some fun, and then there's also a power-up shop there. So you can go into that shop at any time and get any of the power-ups you want. However, if you have enough of the currency, and if you have enough or if you have the power-ups, of course, then you can unlock the power-up to power up the power-ups, which is a nice little touch. So, of course, you have your flame, your regular flame, but then you can level it up all the way to be a dragon and shoot, like, shoot more fire, longer fire, purple fire, bigger fires. It's great. And then even Sleep Kirby. So, Sleep Kirby is just like, Kirby just falls asleep, but then he gets a level that up, and then it also heals him all the way, but also gives him some extra stuff, too. I think it gives him a power boost. It's really cool how they up that. There's really not much changes. It's not like, oh, it does more damage. It does actually do a little more damage, but when majority of the enemies just die in one hit anyway, it is what it is. The story for this game is actually quite interesting, if I do say so. It's really hard to talk about the story without getting into spoilers, but of course, like I said, it's a Kirby game. The story is nice. Of course, the gameplay is really the same as any other Kirby game, but it's just the aspect of it being around like a 3D world / top-down, being able to do whatever you want type thing. But when you get to the end and like you actually like learn about the story and the lore about the Kirby lore of this game, it gets really amazing and it's fantastic. I did love my time with this game too. I loved it so much I even beat kind of like the true secret and the true end of this game. Which is like there's a main story, but then once you beat the main story, it unlocks more of it. It unlocks another area that you have to go through and beat that area. And then once you're done with that, then there's a final boss rush fight in the Colosseum that you have to go through, and that's where the true final boss is. I enjoy this game so much that I was even able to do that. Unfortunately, it is a bit rough. So make sure that you are well prepared before you go do that, or you are well stocked in the currency there, because if you want to just retry that final boss, then you have to pay a price. It is rough, but it's still fun, and I love this game so much because, like I said, Kirby is my favorite Nintendo character, and I'm always going to love a video game of Kirby no matter what. And I loved it. And of course, I honestly didn't mind the little sidekick in this one too. The little sidekick in this game was nice. He was hilarious, or she, I honestly don't know. And it was nice, it was a nice little touch. And of course, you have some new enemies as well, but some old enemies too, which were nice. I honestly really like this game a lot, and it was fun to play, and I pretty much have this game 100% too. So I'm just missing like 1 or 2 things of the capsules, which is our nice little collectibles things at the end that you get. As you're walking through a stage, you find little capsules of little gacha statues, and then of course, eventually it unlocks a gacha machine for you to try to get those things for you. It's really fun, and I enjoyed it, and I like this game a lot, and I love playing it too. And yeah, I'm always looking forward to what they do next with Kirby. Obviously, they have Return to Dreamland Deluxe but Return to Dreamland coming out in March here, which I'm actually super excited for too. I know that's just it's now the Switch version of the Wii U version of the game, but I still enjoyed this game a lot too. And I can't wait to see what they do with Kirby, and I'm really looking forward to this game as well. It's really hard. There's really not much to talk about Kirby. It's like, it's Kirby, it's a simplistic game that had some, hey, you know about Kirby? Okay, he sucks at enemies and he absorbs their powers. And then there's also the new added thing here, and of course the story, which is really good. So I really recommend playing this game if you have a Switch and if you're at all a fan of Kirby as well. It's a fun game, and I hope you guys enjoyed it in any way, shape, or form. But anyway, that is why Kirby and the Forgotten Lands is my number 7 of top 10 games of 2022. Number 6, Harvestella. I'm honestly surprised how much I enjoyed this game. I knew I was probably going to enjoy this game. I mean, it's a game developed by Square Enix, so I usually enjoy those games. But this game, I just loved it almost right at the start. So how this game starts is you wake up in a village during Quietus, which is the season of death. It basically kills all type of wildlife, and it's also somewhat deadly to humans as well if you're exposed to it too long. However, you seem to have an immunity to it for one way or another. But so you wake up in there, and then you're guided by a voice. You eventually pass out in a different spot, and then someone else finds you, and then you get treated, and you basically start living in this village and everything else. And then stuff happens, It's a RPG farm simulative game. If you guys are all familiar, it's Stardew Valley. It has a little bit aspects of Animal Crossing in it as well. Those are really the only 2 games of this kind of genre that I'm familiar with. But I really did enjoy this game a lot. So, of course, like I said, so you basically get pushed into like, well, here's a house. You can live in this house, and you can also start growing a farm here. And that's how you start getting money. So you make a farm, you plant crops, and you also experience the seasons. So you got your spring, summer, fall, and winter. However, at the end of each season, you have quietus. For 1 day, that's when all your crops will die. All your crops will die no matter what, and you can't really go do anything else. I mean, your character can go out and do whatever you want, but that's about it. You can't really do anything. You're only limited to your farmland and then going to the village as well. It does eventually open up too. Eventually you learn about like stuff going on. So then you're able to like leave the village, leave your home, and go explore to other towns and areas and other dungeons with the Seas Lights, which is kind of like the Seas Lights of each. It's basically the 4 crystals. You know, you have your earth, water, fire, and wind. It's basically the 4 crystals. It's interesting. It's fun. You meet new characters. You get new combat abilities, which I haven't even talked about that yet. So it's really cool. Now, that's basically, like I said, that's the whole farming aspect. You can fish eventually. You can craft some stuff to like, craft this thing to process your vegetables into juice, make your wheat into flour, and so on and so forth. Once you advance far enough in the story, you unlock other biomes. You will unlock a water biome, which you can only plant specific crops here. You unlock a cave biome, which you can only plant specific crops in that area, and so on and so forth. And then, of course, you get money, and how you get money is a little bit different. So you plant your crops, and then you sell your crops. You don't have to sell them all. You can save some. Be like, I have 6 wheat. Well, I'm going to save 3 of them, and I'm going to sell 3 of them. I have 8 of carrots. Save 4, sell 4, save 2, sell 6, whatever, however you want to do it. That's how you get money in this game. However, there also is another aspect of this as well, the RPG aspect of it, where you actually go around. You can go to small dungeons. You can go face some enemies, level your character up, get some good items from them. They also, those enemies drop items that you can sell too. They sell hides, horns, some other random stuff that you can just go around and finding as well. You find mushrooms, which you have to, like, you can eat those to get health back and build your stamina gauge, which is also another thing about this game. So I don't know how it works with Stardew Valley or anything of these other kinds of games. So this game, like I said, it's an RPG. It is an RPG in terms of you actually also have classes as well. So you have multiple classes. You have your first class, and then you get the mage, and then you get like a fighting monk, then you get an assassin, you get a lancer, so on and so forth. You get a lot of jobs in this game, and they're all pretty fun to play as. And of course, you do get party members, so it's you and 2 other characters. And basically, you can also become the jobs of those characters. So if you want, eventually you can equip up to 3 jobs, and you can switch between those 3. And then in order to change the jobs again, you need to be at a save point. Same with the party members. You need to be at a save point and change your party members. It is a little weird that, like, you do get accessories like, here's a ring that will increase your damage or whatever, or increase your defense. However, you can't equip those unless you're also at a save too, which I think is a little weird. I digress. So, you go around, you do that fighting, you do the grinding of that, and that's how you level up at the end of every single day. If you die, and there is also a time base too. So, it's a time base that goes up so you start the day at 6 a.m., and then after a while, it goes, maybe after like 2 minutes, it goes to 10, it goes to 6:10, 6:20, 6:30, so on and so forth. And stuff takes time. If you build anything, it takes like 30 minutes to build something. It takes 30 minutes. If you want to cook some stuff, it takes a specific amount of time. So you are limited to a time aspect as well. That starts at 6 a.m. and then goes all the way up to midnight. You get to midnight, and you have like early hours, so you still have a little extra time to try to get back home. Because if you faint in battle, or if you pass out because you got too tired while not at home, you do get penalized. You get back home, and then you wake up at noon the next day, and you also have to pay the doctor, the person who found you in the first place. You have to pay her a small fee. So you gotta make sure you have money too, to be sure to pay off your fee. And that's so. But at the end of the day, like I said, you do get the experience builds up, and you level up accordingly. One thing that I feel like it should have done as well. So you have a stamina bar. Everything takes stamina. Anytime that you are dealing with your crops, from planting to watering to tilling the land to pulling them out, everything takes stamina. Picking up items from the overworld takes stamina. Doing an attack on an enemy takes stamina. I feel like your stamina always stays the same. It's always going to be 100. Like, I don't know what it is, but like your stamina is at 100 and everything takes 1. I wish that leveled up with you too. It didn't have to do with every single level, but I feel like every 10 levels it should go up 10 or so on and so forth. So I feel like the stamina should have gotten more too, because I feel like I'm at level like 60, but I can't do much because my stamina always gets so low. I can't fight monsters as much as I want. I can't go around the entire dungeon to fight the monsters because my stamina always gets low. You can alleviate that by eating some small stuff. Like I said, you can eat some of the veggies that you grow, or if you find mushrooms and other plants out on your adventure, you can eat those things. That will give you like fill up 5% of your belly, which then starts building up your stamina as well. So maybe that's what they were going for. But I still wish that their stamina was also getting bigger too as you leveled up. The game's fun. The game is fun. Eventually, like I said, I highly recommend that you do focus on the story at some point. It doesn't have to be your main focus at first. It does not have to be your main focus at first, but I do highly recommend that you do the story, because eventually, when you complete the story, you get rid of quietus. So then you don't always have to worry about your plants dying and everything else, and you can always just go around and do whatever. So as soon as you beat the main story, which I do recommend that you do beat the main story, but you also have to obviously grind and level up too and tilt to your farm. There might be better ways to do it. This is how I do it. First thing I do in the morning, I wake up. If there's any crops that need to be harvested, I harvest them, plant the new seeds, water. Make sure that you water your plants every single day, otherwise they will not grow. Water your plants, pick up the small items that are around your house, and go to a dungeon. Go to whatever first dungeon you want to go to. Go to the dungeon that you want to go to and do some fighting and grinding there. Advance into the dungeon as much as you can. Eventually, you do find save spots that are also teleport spots within those dungeons. So if you're like, every time you go into the dungeon, you start at the entrance, but there's a save point right there, so you can teleport to whatever other save points that you go to. So it's like, okay, let's continue onwards in the dungeon. And then eventually, like, oh, this is definitely, you will always know when you're about to face the boss of the dungeon. So you're like, oh, this is the boss of the dungeon. And it's like, oh, my stamina is only like at 1/3%. My health isn't all the way good. Let's just go home. Maybe do some other side quests, do something else, go to an earlier area and do some grinding in that spot, or just go fishing and such. And then grind up, and then we'll go face that boss the first thing after I tilt to my crops and everything else in there. It's a great game. It's a fun game. There's no voice act. There is small voice acting during like combat and such, but it's so weird. I felt like this is definitely a game that's like, it's like Bravely Default in a way where it's like, I feel like there should have been more voice acting, but it's not that big of a deal in my opinion. I think it's still good. I enjoyed it a lot. The farming, honestly, as I kept getting further and further into the game, I was like, man, I really just want to just focus on my farm. I want to get as much experience as I can with my farm, level it up all the way so that I can like start actually planning on how I want to move my crops, how I want to do my crops for every single season. Build my animal pen so I can have all the animals in there that I can. Go fishing, do this, do that. It's such a nice time, and I enjoyed it so much. And like I said, I honestly enjoyed this a lot more than I thought I was going to when I first heard about this game and when I played the demo too. Which that is the good news. If you're a little bit on the fence on this game, play the demo. You can play the demo, and it will carry over into the full game if you ever decide to buy it. And I recommend it. I recommend playing the demo. It's a fun game. It's a fun time, and you are going to enjoy this if you at all enjoy any type of RPG, farm simulating like game, like Stardew Valley, and a little bit of Animal Crossing. I enjoyed it. I hope you guys will enjoy this. And yeah, play the demo. That's all I'm gonna say. But that's why Harvestella is my number 6 of top 10 games of 2022. Number 5, Live Alive. Now, this game is incredible. I love it a lot. Now, this game technically is a remaster / re-release or remake. It's not really a remake, but I'd say a remaster of the game Live Alive that came out in Japan many years ago. But it was only out in Japan. It never came out to the West here. So that is why I am counting this as it can be a part of the list, because we never got this game. And I really wish that we did. A lot of people played this game via emulators and all that stuff, and it's a really fun game, and I enjoyed playing it and live streaming it for you guys, even though you will never see the last 2 episodes because for whatever dumb reason Square Enix is like, nope, we're blocking these for you. We're blocking the last episodes. It's like, what the fuck? I kind of understand, but like, this game's over 20 years old, and I'm sorry, it's dumb. Let me explain. So the game is if you guys are somewhat familiar with Octopath Traveler, this game kind of is the predecessor for that. Not predecessor, it's whatever the first one is, you know? It was kind of like the first one of Octopath Traveler. While this game is basically similar. You start off, you can pick you start with 7 characters to pick from, and once you beat all 7 of their stories, the 8th character shows up, and then you do the 8th character, and then the true ending route opens up. So how it works is you start the game, and then you can pick any of the characters at all, and you go through their stories. Some of them are quite short, but they're still good. Some of them are decently length, bit long, and again, I loved all their stories. There's some stuff in here that I loved a lot more. Like there's one place where it's like, oh, I really like the combat of this one a bit more. This is my favorite combat. This one had my favorite battle music. This one had my favorite story. This one had my favorite this and that, you know. But they are all good in my opinion. It doesn't matter which one you start off with. You can pick whichever one you want. So once you are done with all their stories, and again, I recommend, there's somewhere they're a little more open, quote unquote, open for you to do stuff in than some. Like one is just a linear, it's basically somewhat like Street Fighter in a way where you pick and fight bosses, and that's all you do. You just fight the bosses, but you don't get experience. Some other ones where you go, like the prehistoric one is you go around and you do fight bosses and stuff. And it's fun. Or not bosses, you fight enemies and you get experience and such. So you do, you do have stuff like that. And then some is just a straight up, you don't really have any fights at all, save for like the last fight. So it's really fun. And they all of them are really interesting, and I enjoyed playing it as all. Now, again, when you wrap up the all 7 stories, then the 8th one appears. And then you do the 8th one, which I think the 8th one's at a decently length too. I think it's probably one of the longest one. I don't know if I would say it's the longest one, but it's definitely a long one. So then you go and do it. And then once you're done with that, it unlocks the true path, It's like, hey, here you go. Now you can do the true ending. Now, how that one works is you choose which of your character is like, which characters are you going to play as. So even though all the characters are from different timelines, not timelines, but different time periods, at the end, they all get joined together. And then you join in, and you pick whichever character is going to be the one that you focus on, and then you have to go around and search for all the other characters and have them join you. And it's really fun too. And yeah, like I said, you could just go straight through the story, but there's like hidden stuff in each character's path as well. And then in the truth path as well, there's actually some hidden stuff in there too, where you can go around and get their ultimate weapons and everything, and just do all sorts of things with it instead of just going straight for the end and such. But it's still really good. I really enjoyed it a lot. And of course, the music. Of course, it's by legendary Yoko Shinomura, who's fucking amazing. I think this was like one of her earliest, if not one of her first composers. I know she composed for Street Fighter 2, which I think might have came out before this, but either way, the music is fucking amazing. And of course, if it's Yoko Shinomura, of course it's going to be amazing. And yeah, all the stories are great. Like I said, the prehistory one's good. The Wild West is good. You have the near future, which is kind of like the present day now. You have present day, and then you have distant future, and then all the other ones like Twilight Japan, Udo China, and then you have Middle Ages. They are all fantastic stories, and I love this game a lot. It's so much fun, and it's great. There's some of these areas they're all different too. Like the Twilight of Japan one is basically how do you want to play that route? It's when you play as the ninja. Is do you want to kill all the enemies or kill none of the enemies? You know, besides the main bosses. It's incredible, and it is a treat, and you can play in so many different ways and the ending's going to be slightly different depending on, oh, did you kill some enemies? Did you kill all enemies? Did you kill no enemies? It's really great that way, and then it's really great, and there is an overarching theme. There is something in each of them that will tie it all together nicely at the end, and it's beautiful when it does that. I love this game so much. It is, like I said, it is unfortunate that Square Enix are kind of like assholes, and that, oh, you can show everything from the first 7 characters, but you can't show the 8th character, and you can't show the true ending, even though this game came out like 8 million years ago. It's like, no, what the fuck? That's dumb. And even though I think there have been some people that have put the real ending out too, so I'm like, what the fuck? Or like everything. So I don't know. It's just so unfortunate that is the case. It's like, why? I see no reason why they have to do it this way, but I digress. Either way, that didn't really bog it down for me in terms of my experience. It's just unfortunate, like, you know, people don't get to experience, because like me, I love seeing other people's experience with games. So I would love to have seen how someone experienced this game too. It's like, oh, how did this person like feel about this character and how it all ended and such. Fortunately, you never see it. It's unfortunate, but I somewhat get it. But at the same time, I hope it's one of those things where it's like, okay, enough time has passed. We are not going to block it anymore. Like, the game has been out for like 6 months now, almost 6 months. I think that's well enough. That's fine. That doesn't need to be there. But I digress. That's more of a personal issue, but it had nothing to do with my experience with the game at all. I love this game. It's definitely one of my favorite Switch games of the year that came out here. It's fantastic, and I hope you guys, I highly recommend picking this game up if you are a fan of any kind of like old school JRPGs in a way, and even just JRPGs in general. Like, it's fantastic. If you did like Octopath Traveler, which I hope you did, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people did. Octopath Traveler 2 is coming out later in January or early February. I can't remember when, but it's great, and I hope you guys enjoy playing this game because it's fun. It is fun as all, and there is definitely a way that you can definitely break the game where you're just super powerful as well. So if you want to play that way, go on ahead and do it that way. It's fun. It's enjoyable. I had a blast playing this game, and I loved it every time. I definitely need to go back and find like all the secrets and all of the routes and everything too. So then it's like, oh, hey, I've collected all this stuff, you know, because it's a fun game. It truly is a great experience. And they did actually add some stuff too. A little bit. They did add like a new boss at the end too, from what I'm hearing. They added like a new boss from the original. So that's really cool. So I love that too. And I think they tweaked maybe some of the writing as well, which I'm not entirely sure if that is the case or not, but it's really great. It's really fun, and I hope you guys enjoy this game too. It's a fantastic game, and again, I can't recommend it enough because Live Alive is a fantastic game, and that is why it's my number 5 of my top 10 games of 2022. Number 4, Strangers of Paradise Final Fantasy Origins. I love this game. I love this game so much. It has a stupid plot. It has a stupid, I don't know. I love it so much because of how it is. Obviously, it's so memeable. Like, when this game first like came out, everyone was like, ooh, interesting. It's basically like a Dark Souls / Neo Final Fantasy, which is fantastic. I guess it's more so Neo like, because Neo is you pick missions and then you go around and, you know, do the mission and such, and then you have different things. I mean, it is made by Team Ninja, who did make Neo, and it's a fantastic game. I love this game so much. So here's the basis of it is you are Jack, and your two friends are going to go kill chaos, and that's basically the whole thing. It's like, I'm here to kill chaos, and Jack's like, I don't give a fuck about anything else. I'm here to kill chaos, and he's like, fuck you. It's like bullshit and everything, and he's listening to Limp Bizkit as he's walking away. It's hilarious, and I love it. The story is dumb. I mean, the story's not completely dumb. It does have, I feel like it is actually a really nice story when we get towards the end, but until getting to that point, it's stupid, but I still enjoy it so much just because I freaking love how over the top Jack is as a character. He's so one-sided until later he does, change it up. So, this is also somewhat of an origin story of Final Fantasy 1. Like, this all takes place before Final Fantasy 1. So this is like the true first Final Fantasy in a way, in terms of timeline and all that stuff. The gameplay is really fun. You have multiple classes that you can pick from. You can switch on the fly between which one you want to be. Then it has a mechanic where you have like a block in a way too. You have a soul shield where if that gets too low, then you're wide open for attack. You can break the enemy's stance or shields, and then you can do like a kill blow on them. It's fantastic. The bosses are fun to fight. The story is, like I said, the story's fine. Gameplay, I enjoyed it a lot. It might be a little hard to get at first, but there is a demo that I'm sure there is a demo that you can pick up and play through to be like, okay, how do you want to do this and such. It's fun. It's enjoyable. I love this game. It's hilarious. And honestly, the one thing I do have a gripe about, though, is the DLC. So this game does have DLC, which isn't bad, but the fact that you need to be on the hardest difficulty first, which is like a chaos difficulty, I think was the first hard difficulty is. I don't like this. So it's like, yeah, people want to just go through it on the normal difficulty. And if you feel like it's like, hey, I'm like, I'm at level so-and-so with all this high-level equipment. Let me go back and play some of the earlier levels with this equipment and on the highest difficulty, and maybe get better equipment and such. Which that's another thing too. I should mention this too. So there is equipment that you find out either in chests or by beating enemies. They drop equipment that you can equip, your basic headgear, your body, armor, weapons, shields, all that stuff. You can find that all in any of the levels as all, and depends on how high the level is, depends on what kind of gear you get. So if you're being on a normal difficulty, you'll get like basic stuff, but if you beat it on a higher difficulty, you'll get better and higher level equipment, which isn't bad. And then of course there's a smithy that through some updates, I believe they have updated that you can now increase the level of the equipment too. So if you really like this piece of equipment, but it's like a level 50 and the highest level is like 100 or something like that, then there's a way that you could get rid of some of the old armor that you have and level it up so that's a higher level and won't be as bad when you do some of the other tougher missions. So you have better equipment for that as well. And then of course there is, like I said, there's levels, or there's classes in here as well. So you have classes. It ranges from a variety of classes. You have your Puglius, you have your Lancer, you have your Dragoons, you have your White Mage, your Dark Mage, your Red Mage, your Blue Mage, which actually Blue Mage is something that they add in the DLC, but I digress. They have so many classes here. You have your Sage, which it's honestly interesting too. So you start off with basic classes, and then it's like, you need to unlock this portal, or you need to unlock this upgrade in both this class and another class in order to unlock this new class, and then so on and so forth. So I liked how they did that in terms of classes. And there are ways too, like there's crystals that you can find as well by either completing some missions on hard difficulty as rewards, or you can just find them out in the wild. I think they're in some chests and other stuff too. So you can just use those to level up your classes, or you can just do it the old-fashioned way, have their classes equipped and fight. Now, the equipment is also a bit different as well. In your equipment, they have like a percentage of, you have like a 10% of this class. You have a 15% of this other class. That does increase, that will give that class some experience points, but not as much as if you actually had it on equipped. It just gives it a little bit of a more bonus experience as well. But it also will give Jack some abilities depending on how much of a percentage that is, which is really good. So if you want to level it up to be have 100% proficiency with a dark mage, because then you get a specific kind of ability. That's fantastic. It's great. It works. It's fun. And it's great. Now, like I mentioned before, the one thing that I don't like is the DLC. And the only reason why I don't really like the DLC is they're forcing you to play those on hard difficulties. If you're someone who doesn't really like playing games on hard difficulty, then that would be an issue. But if you're someone who's somewhat like me, who likes completing games, it's also an issue too, because, you know, there's trophies that come out with the DLCs too, which again, not a bad deal. But at the same time, when they're forcing you to fight on the highest difficulty that was with every new DLC that came out, they added a new difficulty. With the first one, it was like the Bahamut difficulty. With the second one, I can't remember. I don't think it was called Gilgamesh, but for lack of not remembering, let's just call it Gilgamesh difficulty. So they made even more harder difficulties, and you can't even do those missions unless you're on that difficulty. So you can't do the first DLC without being on the Bahamut difficulty. You can't do the second DLC without being on that difficulty. And unfortunately, there is still one more expansion that's coming out late January here, which I'm super excited for. I'm going to assume there's going to be another difficulty there that you can't do anything unless you're on that difficulty too as well. Now, obviously, the first two DLCs that came out are actually different from each other. The first one's about Bahamut, the second one is about Gilgamesh, but they're also structured differently. With Bahamut, it had a whole like, hey, you can do some missions, or you gotta do some different missions to get some Bahamut tokens and such. So you can go do that. With the Gilgamesh one, it's in a separate area, and you gotta be like, oh, here's like a labyrinth, and then you gotta do portal stuff and such. There is a way that you can easily just break that with a specific class and an ability, and if you're doing it where you have unlimited break gauge, it is quite easy to do that as well. It's just unfortunately like, oh, your reward won't be as big, but like, do you care? No, not at all. So it's still fun. It's still enjoyable. I just wish they didn't force you to beat it on the hard difficulty. Of course, well, obviously when I beat the game myself, I started playing on a high difficulty because I'm like, oh, fuck it. I love this game so much. I'm going to play on the hard difficulty and get some better equipment and all that stuff. And it's fun. It's still fun. I still enjoy this game, and I am actually looking forward to the last expansion of this, which I'm super excited for, because it's great. I love this game so much. It's a fantastic story. It's, you know, like I said, it takes place before Final Fantasy 1. It talks about the Warriors of Light and everything about that. I really don't want to get too much into the... I mean, there is story in there, and there is spoilers for it, but like, if you somewhat pay attention, you're like, oh, that's what's gonna, like, this is what's gonna happen. It's gonna be this kind of thing. But it's still, I don't want to spoil it for you, because it's a fun game, and if you don't care too much about the story, go on ahead and, you know, look it up. But I'm not gonna spoil it for the people that do care. It's a fantastic game. I still loved it. I love the gameplay of it, and how memeable and how just silly and over the top it is. And it's just one of those things that it's like, it's so fucking stupid, but I fucking love it all the same. And I still enjoy this game to this day. And I probably should get back into playing it just a little bit more so I'm ready for when the DLC comes out. But that is why Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origins is my number 4 of top 10 games of 2022. Number 3, Elden Ring. Now, I know a lot of people are going to be like, how is this your number 3 game? Let me explain. If this was your number 2, if this was your number 1, I totally understand why that is the case. I really did enjoy this game. Elden Ring is the newest From Software game that's akin to Dark Souls, Bloodborne, and same as Sekiro. Although I think Sekiro is more like Nioh in a way, but it is definitely Dark Souls-esque too. So you're a Tarnished, you know? The Tarnished has to go and become the new Elden Lord. So he has to go around, kill all the demigods in the lands in between, kill the demigods, get their ruins, find a way into the Air Tree, through the capital, and become the Elden Lord and bring out about a new age. It's a fantastic game. It's a big, massive, overworld, open world Dark Souls game, which is fun as hell. And much like the Dark Souls games, its story is more akin to being through item descripts. which isn't bad. And there is actually a story without that too. There's a decent story too. You just pay attention as to talk to all the people that are there. Talk to some of the NPCs, talk to some of the people at the round table hold. It's there. There is a story. There is something here in terms of story. And then if you follow along some branching stories, some side questing from some of the NPCs and such, you'll learn more. So you learn like, oh, this character is infatuated with this other character in some way, shape, or form. Why is that? Let's follow their story and learn more. Oh, them following this person is not really good because this thing is like terrible or such. Or that's how you might feel. But then someone else could be like, oh, that's actually really cool. I'm going to follow this type thing, It's fantastic. You can go anywhere in the world. There's so many places you can go. There is also a recommendation like, hey, we recommend you go to this place right now. But you can be like, nah, I want to go to that place right now. So it is unlike with Dark Souls and Bloodborne. It's not quote-unquote linear, which those games technically aren't really linear either, but you're not so... But in those games, you're a little more closed off to the things that you can do at certain parts of the game. Eventually, obviously, you open up those pathways and you're like, oh, hey, we can do whatever the fuck we want. With this game, you can literally do whatever you want. You can even skip the tutorial quote-unquote dungeon. I wouldn't really call it a dungeon, but let's just, for all intents and purposes, it's a dungeon. You can literally skip the thing there, the tutorial dungeon. So you can literally skip that, and unfortunately you'd be like, how the fuck am I supposed to do shit? And it's like, oh, there's a tutorial dungeon, which it's fun. And then, of course, all the weapons are great, too. There's so many awesome weapons. Your build can be whatever you want it to be, much like the Dark Souls games. It's fun. I did like the story there, too. The story is actually very interesting to me, and I loved it. And, of course, the gameplay, too. The gameplay, like I said, is Dark Souls-esque, and it's fun. It's enjoyable. If you like these kinds of games, it's great. Now, let's talk about some of the not-so-great things, which there's not that much. It's the easiest of the Dark Souls games, which isn't a bad thing. If you're at all familiar with Dark Souls, Demon Souls, Bloodborne, any type of those games, you know that it's like, oh, this is a rage-inducing like game. You're supposed to be dying a lot, over and over and over again. You're going to lose your souls or your ruins, whatever they're called in whatever game. You're going to lose them over and over and over again. And obviously, if you do die, you do have the chance to get back up and go over and try to get them back before you die again. Because if you die again, then you lose them permanently. And of course, those are what you use to level up any of your stats, level up your stats, increase the power of your weapons as well, and buy stuff. It's your currency. It's the overarching currency of everything. Again, if you're familiar with any of the Souls-like games, that's what it is. But again, it's the easiest of the Dark Souls games, which I'm not saying that's a bad thing at all. This is definitely but then I also would say this is not a good introduction to a FromSoft game as well. But it could work, but it could also not work. So you could be familiar with some of the Dark Souls tropes. You're like, oh, the Dark Souls trope for this thing is this thing, blah, 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 blah. But then you play this for the first time and people will be like, what the fuck, and everything else. So there are definitely some pros and cons to it of being your first ever Dark Souls, Souls-like, Soulsborne-like game. There are pros to the cons to it. The pro is like it's the easiest one, which is also a con, is that it's the easiest one. So you could do this and you'd be like, oh, all the other games are probably going to be just as quote-unquote hard or just as quote-unquote easy. So let me go play them. And then you realize you're getting your shit rocked like much earlier, much more if you play any other games and you're like, what the fuck? So I throw caution to the wind. If you do get Elden Ring, it's your first ever Soulsborne game, don't expect all the other ones to be like that. It's still a great game, don't get me wrong. If you want to play this game, go ahead and play the game. It is fun, it's enjoyable, it's beautiful looking, it has so much of a good art direction and art designs. That's fantastic. And of course, the little bit of the characters that you do meet along the way too, they're interesting. There's obviously some characters that you'd be like, oh, I don't like you, but I recommend not killing them first. Don't kill them because they could be tied to some important quests along the way. If you really want to know about those quests, you can always look them up. There are some quests that do involve some characters that need to be alive, but then they also involve quests that's like, hey, go kill that character or go kill that character. they are still interesting, they're still fun, and it's enjoyable. It is a great game. I love it. Like I said, if this is your number one game, I know exactly why it is, because like I said, this was really hard for me. Like, I'll be honest, I knew what my top 3 were going to be for the longest time. And it's like, how am I going to order them? And it's like, I think I know how I'm going to order it. So if Elden Ring was your number 1, that's great. I totally get why it was your number 1. For me personally, it's my number 3 because even though I liked everything about it, I liked the visuals, the music, which I feel like there's not too much music. I mean, obviously there's boss music, there's environmental music. There is music to this game. It's a beautiful sounding music, but at the same time, I feel like it's not kind of like a key important thing in this game, which again, that's not a bad thing at all. That's not a bad thing at all. But I still feel like the music is also kind of impactful in terms of games as well. But I do love this game. It's fun. The characters there, the story, whether you want to know more details about the story or whether you want to just follow the basics of it, where you're not even reading out the descriptions, you're not following any paths of any other characters. You're just going from, I just want to go be Elden Lord and wreck shit or whatever, and you just want to do that basic story bit. Good for you. It's still enjoyable, but you get a little bit more of a taste and more of a it's a little more spicy when you delve deep into some of the stories, delve deep into some of these characters, delve deep into this religion that they're going through, delve deep into their deities, delve deep into the demigods, delve deep into everything. It's a fun and enjoyable experience, and I do like this game a lot. Again, like I said, there are pros and cons to it being your first Soulsborne game. Would I recommend it for your first time? Kind of. I would recommend that you do play this if you're at all interested in it, because it's the easiest one, but also because it's the easiest one, I also don't want to recommend it to you. It's so weird, but it's still a good game. I do recommend playing this, and if you want to, get good, just keep playing it. It's a fantastic game. You literally can do whatever you want. If you're having trouble in one section of the game, you're like, all right, I'm just gonna go over on this path too. And if it's a little harder than the other one, but you're still managing to do it, and then there you're good. You can grind there, level up your character, level up your stats, power your weapon up more, get better items, do whatever you need, and then you can go back to the previous areas and then take down those previous areas that you're having trouble with beforehand. But it's still fun. I highly recommend playing this game if you're at all fans of the Dark Souls, Bloodborne series. It's still great. But again, it's not my favorite of the Souls-like games. That still belongs to Bloodborne, and Bloodborne is a fantastic game in its own right. And Bloodborne is just fantastic. But that is why Elden Ring is my number 3 of my top 10 games of 2022. Number 2, God of War Ragnarok. Again, much like with Elden Ring, I totally would understand if this was your number 1. But for me, it's my number 2. But holy crap, is this game fantastic. It is, for me, it definitely is a major step up from the 2018 release of God of War. It's the sequel to that game, obviously, because at the end of that game, you kill Baldur, and you start the Fimbulwinter, which is the first sign of Ragnarok, basically the end of the world. And Kratos and Atreus are trying to find their way to prevent it. It's great. It's great. You have Freya still coming after you because she wants revenge for you killing Baldur, even though you killed him to save her life. But it's still one of those things that doesn't matter. It was her son. It's fantastic. This game is great. It starts off I don't want to say slow, but it starts off on a high note, much like the first game too. The first game had that stranger fight. In this game, it has the first Thor fight, and it's like, oh my god, like that fight is so incredible. It's fun. It's all over. It's great. Like, that's one of the things I was surprised about. So if you found like the quote unquote secret ending, which is basically of God of War, the 2018, you beat the game, and then you go lay down in your bed, and then, there's a storm coming, and then Kratos and Atreus goes out, and Kratos goes, "Who are you?" And it's Thor. Like, it's fantastic. It's so good. The game starts before that scene, but then that scene plays, and you're like, oh, here we fucking go. It's fantastic. And I loved how they portrayed Thor in this game too. I love how they portrayed all of the Norse gods that we saw. You know, you have Thor, you have Odin, you have Heimdall, you have so many of the other ones too. That's like, okay, this is interesting. I like how they were portrayed. And it's fantastic. Speaking of Odin, I'm honestly surprised that we saw him as early as we did as well. I expected Odin maybe not so much later, but I expected him not as soon as we did get him. It's still fantastic. A lot of people are like, when they did that first interaction, they're like, what the fuck? It's like, I feel like they're not talking as they should. And it's like, I feel like they're talking just fine. Like, that's how Balder talked in a way. It's like, I don't know. I didn't mind it at all, but I guess some people didn't mind it at all. Another good thing about this game is you actually get to explore all 9 realms, unlike in the first game where you didn't get to explore 3 or 4 of them. I know for sure 3 of them were unavailable, and this one you get to explore all 9 of them. It's a fantastic game, and much like the first game as well, you don't have to go around. You can always go wherever you want once you get all the necessary items and abilities to traverse the areas and get all the collectibles and do all that stuff. It's fun and enjoyable, and much like the first game too, there's some stuff that carries over. Like I said, there are collectibles. There is the Muspelheim trials as well, which is also pretty fun. I think they changed it a little bit in here, but that's fantastic. I actually loved how they have the Muspel trials in this game too. It's fun, it's enjoyable, and it's great. And another good thing too is you get the axe and the blades of chaos like pretty much right away in this game, and you don't have to go through like halfway through the game to get the blades of chaos like you did in the first game. A little spoiler alert, but if you're watching this, then you already somewhat should know what happens in God of War 2018. It's great. And it's a fantastic game. And let's get to the story. If you guys have watched my live stream series of Ragnarok, I talked about how much I loved in the first game. It's basically how Kratos and Atreus are like very separated in a way. Like Kratos wasn't really I don't want to say he was a bad father, but Kratos was really not around too much for Atreus. And another thing about this game too is you actually get to see how Faye looks and what Faye looks, because Kratos gets like night visions of her every now and then about stuff that happened in the past. It's fantastic. It is a really nice time, and just those are enjoyable moments too. And it's really tied with some good music too. The music in this game is great as well. I see why it did win Best OST at the Game Awards, even though I still think Xenoblade Chronicles 3 should have won that, but I digress. It's a fantastic soundtrack, and of course by Bear McCreary as well. It's fantastic. It sounds good. They even have Bear even has a character in this game too, which you meet fairly early on too, named Rab. He's great, and of course he's also somewhat of a musician as well. It's fantastic. The game is fun. I enjoy the game a lot. The characters, and again with the story. So like I said, 2018 was kind of like, you know, the journey of father and son, you know, of trying to grow the bond. And this one too, I was like, how are they going to top that? They topped it. It continues onwards because, you know, Atreus is older, and Atreus is trying to find his place in the world and learn about his destiny as Loki and his role as a giant or half giant and all that stuff. He's trying to find all this out, and, you know, Kratos is doing his best to keep him safe. He doesn't want Atreus to go to war with Asgard. He doesn't want to go to war. Kratos doesn't want to go back to his old ways and go into war and all that stuff. And it's totally understandable why he feels that way, because it's like, no, you don't want this. Like, he doesn't want Atreus to be like him in any way, shape, or form. He doesn't want to have him be trained as a Spartan. He doesn't want him to know war. He doesn't want him to be, you know, obviously he's training Atreus so that he can take care of himself when Kratos is gone, because that's another thing too. At the end of 2018, Kratos saw the prophecy of his death. So he's like, oh shit. So he's like, that's why he's got to prepare Atreus to train him to be ready for when that time comes, so that he can survive on his own without him. It's great. The story is fantastic. It takes you to all 9 of the realms as you're looking for the Norse God of War tier, and, you know, preventing Ragnarok, just having all this great stuff. The story is really good. I loved how they build on the relationship with Kratos and Atreus. They also build on the relationship with, of course, everyone else. You have Sindri, you have Brock, Freya comes back too, and of course Mimir. Mimir is fantastic in this game too. I just loved it. I loved how they grew on the relationships and how they just showed Kratos in such a different light too. Continuing on from the 2018 God of War Kratos. It's a great story. I loved it. It got me tearing up a few times at the end because it's so it pulls at your heartstrings at moments and you're like, fuck, it's so good, and I enjoyed it from start to finish. And of course the gameplay is good too. You know, you have your basics. It's basically the same as the 2018 gameplay as well, but with some added stuff as well. They took some abilities away. They tweaked the abilities a little bit. They changed the abilities to be runic attacks or stuff like that. So it's still fun. It's still enjoyable. And it's all around a fantastic game. It's definitely worth the praise. It is definitely worth the praise. Although I'm a little surprised that we are now done with the Norse Pantheon. You know, the Norse. There's going to be no more Norse God of Wars games. So I don't know what they're going to plan to do for the future of the series. Will they go with Egyptian? Will they go with some other religion theme? Will they go with Buddhism? Will they go with Japanese? Chinese, whatever. I honestly don't know what the plan is. And the way that they do end God of War Ragnarok is like, okay, they could have some DLC in this, but do I want DLC? I honestly don't know. 2018 didn't really have DLC, so I think it'd be a little weird if Ragnarok had DLC, but I don't know. Either way, I'm excited to see what the future of the God of War series brings out. And of course, there's so many things about these games that I haven't talked about that it's still great. It's fun. I love the story, the gameplay, everything about it. And again, the whole fact that you can traverse the 9 realms and all the other characters that you meet too, they're a gem. And of course, like how Kratos kind of like evolves. Like Kratos, it's a continuation of Kratos' story as well, and also continuation of Atreus' story. And it's just, you just see how Kratos is so different from, even in 2018, you see how different it is because he's trying his best to protect his son and everything. And it's enjoyable to watch and just look at their relationship and as it goes. It's great. I love it, and I enjoy this game top to bottom. I love it so much I platinumed it, but again, you guys can watch that if you watch my live stream series. So, but anyway, that I loved everything about God of War Ragnarok, and that's why it's my number 2 of my top 10 games of 2022. Number 1, Xenoblade Chronicles 3. Are you surprised with how much I enjoyed playing this game? If you guys watch my Let's Play of this, I love this game. It's fantastic. It gets you going at the start of the game. It's overall amazing. It's about the war on Ionis between Kevesi and Agni forces. You go back and forth, and they only have a 10-year life span, and if they can get to that 10 years, then they can do a homecoming. And it's fantastic. But they also need to take the lives of their opponents so that they can keep their flame clock alive, which is a sign for this colony to stay alive and be alive and everything too. It's a great game. It's a fantastic game. You're in that's how it's, that's your premise. And then how it starts off, so you get all your characters, is your Kevesi soldier, your 3 Kevesi soldiers, Noah, Lance, and Uni, and with their mechanic help Riku, are, doing on a mission. But then they run across the Agnian forces as well. That's where they run into Mio, Senna, Tyon, and their Nopon, Manana. And they fight, but then they are met with the third party who is like, no, you guys shouldn't be fighting against each other. There's a true enemy out there you need to be fighting and everything. And there's a power that he has, and or not a power. There's like a stone that he has that gives power to people. So he gives the power to those 6 characters, and they can fuse together to become an Ouroboros, which becomes a massive thing, and they fight this enemy. It's a great game. I'm not really doing a good job of explaining, but it's a fantastic game, and that's all I'm going to tell you about the story. It's like, there's your story right there. And the story is really good. If you've played Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and you've played Xenoblade Chronicles 2, there are definitely little Easter eggs. There's definitely little, oh, hey, that's from, that's from Xenoblade Chronicles 1. Or, oh, hey, that's from Xenoblade Chronicles 2. And, of course, the combat's different, too. Depending on if you, and this is entirely new. I should mention this first before I talk about the combat. This is entirely new to the Xenoblade Chronicles game. There are classes involved now. Of course, you have your generic, tank, attacker, and healer. And, they do specific moves and such. But in here, there's more. There's more tanks, there's more attackers, there's more healers. And your 6 characters can all change into any of those classes once they get unlocked, either by having one of your characters be in that class and then, just doing fights, getting job points, and increasing like how much job points that they get by being enemies, being unique enemies, being some different types of enemies, and so on and so forth. And eventually the other characters will unlock those classes. And of course, the more characters that have those classes on, the faster it is that other characters will unlock them. So it's great. They all start off with their normal classes, and then eventually they get a secondary class, which is great. And then it's fantastic. You can't really switch to classes on the fly. You have to open up the menu and choose like, oh, I want this character to be a tank. Oh, I want this character to be a healer. And of course, they're better as like, oh, they'd be better as this class than this character would be as that class. But of course, if you want to like level up them all to level 10, which is the max at first, there will be a way for them to get higher levels in those classes as well. But that's how it is. So it depends when you level them up. Then they get them level 10. You unlock more abilities. You unlock stronger arts. You even unlock stronger arts. And when you level up your character as well, you unlock more slots to put in equipment. You unlock more slots to put in more arts in and such. It's really fun. But how the combat works is depending on what your class. If you are a Kavesi class, your arts and attacks are akin to how it was in Xenoblade Chronicles 1, where you do the attack and then it's on a cooldown timer. So it's like, oh, you use that art. Oh, it's going to take like 45 seconds for it to be usable again. But if you're with an Agnian class, it's similar to how it was for Xenoblade Chronicles 2, where you use the attack and every time an auto attack hits, it fills up the bar more and more and more. And that's really cool. And then another thing is that after a while, you can actually put on more arts. So normally you have 3 arts, but then you also have 3 arts of the other side too. So you have arts of whatever class you are, but then, so if you're a Kavesi, if your class that you're currently equipped is a Kavesi class, then you have another section of attacks over here that are Agnian attack arts. And you can pair them up with all those arts. Now you can do them individually, but what you can do to deal more damage is do them both at the same time. So you hold down a button and then you hit the corresponding button. So it's like you hold down R2 or you hold down a ZR and then you hit X to do the top attacks. It'll do both of them. Otherwise, you'd have to do the directional pad if you want to do them separately. So if you want to do it separately, you hit X. And if you want to do that same one, but on its own, you hit the top pad. It's great. And if you do them combined, it gives you more damage. And of course, it builds up your Ouroboros gauge as well. So when your Ouroboros gauge gets to a certain level, at level 3, you can do Ouroboros whenever. It's not on cooldown. But if you get to level 3, that's when you can do more damage to your Ouroboros arts, where it's like, oh, this Ouroboros arts, if it's at level 3, it would break the enemies or it will topple enemies. And of course, that's back too from Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and 2. So there's 2 lines here. So you have break, topple, launch, and smash. That was in Xenoblade Chronicles 2. And then I think in Xenoblade Chronicles 1, it's been a while since I played Xenoblade Chronicles 1. You have break, topple. I can't remember it off the top of my head, and stun. Let's just say it's stun, and then burst. So you can burst. That was also in Xenoblade Chronicles 2. I can't remember, but anyway, so you have those 2 lines, which they do different. So the smash combo does damage, but the burst combo actually it doesn't do damage, but it does drop, the enemies drop some items that could be rare, or items that they drop prior to. Like, they can drop them There's items that they drop when you defeat them, but there's also items that they might not drop if you defeat them too. So it's really good that way too. And also, it will calm them down. So after a while, if you're fighting an enemy, they could have like a fire gauge. There's like a little fire symbol on their health bar, and if it gets to that point, they start becoming enraged, which means they'll do more damage and all that stuff. So you can easily get rid of that if you do a burst combo on them. It's great. The gameplay is fun. All the characters and all the heroes as well. And that's another thing too. I didn't even talk about this. Unlike in Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and 2, you actually have all 6 of your party members out at once. And the only thing that you change now is your 7th member, your hero, which you unlock via some story missions, some side missions. It's great. And that's another thing too about this game. The side missions are phenomenal. They're not unlike with Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and 2. These side missions are like, oh, they actually like have written dialogue because all the characters are there. Unlike in Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and 2, it'd be like, oh, they have to have generic things. Like, so in Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and 2, you talk to them like, hey, oh, hi, what's going on? It's like, oh, I really want to help. Let's go do this. What do you think? It's like, I don't know. Maybe we should wait first and see what they have to say first. Like, very generic stuff like that. But this one, they're actually having a conversation. Be like, oh, hey, what's with the long face? So and so. It's like, oh, well, we have an issue with food supply. It's like, oh, that's not good. You definitely need a good food supply for this. Why haven't you, like, what's the problem? They're not generic sounding, but they sound generic how I'm explaining it, but they're not as generic sounding because there's actually, like, they're actually talking about the issue, too. It's not just like, oh, let's see if we can help. It's like, oh, you guys are having a chain supply issue. Let's go and take care of that, you know? It's a game that I really love the most. What I really like a game is like, how do you feel about doing the side content too? If a game makes it feels like there's some side content, it's like, oh, this should have been a main quest thing, even though it's a good thing that's not, then that's a great game in my opinion. If you enjoy doing the side content, that's great. And that's one of the reasons why this is my number one, is because of that. And of course, the story too. The story is phenomenal. And of course, the open world, the music alone is fantastic. There's so many tracks in this game that's just like, oh, it made me tear up. Of course, the final song, the song during the end of Chapter 5, Chapter 6. Just saying those, people know what I'm talking about too. There's the boss music for the specific enemy. That would be a final boss music in any other game. But that's just like, nope. Whenever you're fighting this kind of enemy, that's the boss music. And you're like, what? It's great. The music, the environments are beautiful. It's overall gorgeous looking. I loved all the characters. I love how they interact with each other, how they don't really start off as friends, you know, because, you know, they're Agni and Kavesi, so they're supposed to be mortal enemies. But then they learned, like, you know, maybe there's some bullshit going on here, you know? And it's fantastic. And I love how their relationships develop over the course of the game, how you can kind of get a hint to be like, there's something going on between this character and that character. That's very interesting. And all and such. It's great. It's lovable. It's enjoyable. It does have feel-good moments. And oh my god, this game made me tear up and cry so much too. The story really touched me a lot in this game. And that's one of the reasons why it's my number one too. It's because the story is great. The side quest is great as well in this game. I loved everything about it. All the environments, the open world feeling of it, even though it's technically not open world, but how big the environments are compared to like some of the other areas in Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and 2. It's an overall fantastic experience. I loved playing this game start to finish. I loved playing it so much. I did not want to put it down at all. I was like, I just want to keep playing it. I want to keep playing it. I just want to just explore. There's just times where I'm just like, I'm just going to explore, go around. If I see a rare, unique enemy, I'm going to do that. And that's another thing too. There are separate enemies in here too compared to Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and 2. So there's the regular enemies, then there's enemies with blue health bar, not blue health bars, but like has a blue border, which they're a little more rare. They're like rare enemies, so they'll like drop some unique items, and they also give you more experience and more job points as well. And then of course there's sparkly enemies, which give you more items. And of course there's the unique enemies. They're kind of like, all right, they could be hard. They're like harder than normal enemies, so you might not be able to take them down right away. Even if you are at their level, to be like, oh, this enemy's at level 2, but we're at level 2 as well, so we'll be able to beat them. But since they're that unique enemy, they're a little harder. and it's going to be tough too. And of course, going back to the combat, there's chain attacks, which is fantastic. It took a little while for me to understand how chain attacks work, but if you're able to pick up how it works, it's a great thing as well. And if you beat an enemy with a chain attack at like the end of the chain attack, you get more experience, you get more job points, you get more money, you get more items. It's great. There are some things in this game that are like, the villains, there are some good villains, but overall the villains aren't too great as compared to like Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and 2 villain. But I'd say like, okay, there's some villains that are like, okay, it's great. They're like, these are some good, interesting villains. Graphical wise, again, there are some good graphics in this game. There are some issues as well. There are some quests that be like a little questionable, like, that didn't feel like as it should have, you know. With the premise, it didn't feel like it should, but it's fine. It's not that great, or it's not bad, but I feel like it should have been a little bit different. And there's other issues as well, overall. But I feel like there's so little issue compared to all the good stuff. That's like all the good so outweighs the small issues that and that was for me personally. That's a me personal thing of what I'm saying about it, but still overall great, and I love this game from start to finish, and that is exactly why Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is my #1 game of the year 2022. And that is it, guys. That was my top 10 games of 2022. It was so hard to find some of these games. I know, like, obviously, majority of my top 10 or my top 5 for sure were like, these are games that are going to be on my list no matter what. And then I was basically trying to find everything else, which is kind of like how it always is for me when I'm making these lists. And again, I want preference. This is just how I feel. These are just my personal feelings. If you don't agree with them, that's fine. You don't have to. This isn't the end-all, be-all of, oh, this is the definite top 10 games of 2022. No, this is just my personal top 10. Obviously, your personal top 10 is going to be a lot different than mine or anything. Your #1 is definitely going to be different than my #1. Your #3 is going to be different than my #3. Your #10 is going to be different than my #10. And that's what's great about video games too. They're also good that people have different experiences with them. People feel differently about them. I enjoyed every single game I played this year, and say for a couple, but I'll talk about that too. Of course, there are so many games I didn't mention in this list as well, which will be mentioned in my honorable mentions video, which is coming out tomorrow. If you guys are watching this the day that came out, but if you want, obviously I'll talk about those games as well in that video. But I enjoyed these games a lot. I enjoyed a lot of the games I played. There's definitely games I didn't play that I wish I did, because I've heard some of them are good, and it's great. And I know there's some stuff that I probably didn't mention in this, but this isn't supposed to be some kind of a review, anything like that. I know there's other, like, there's parts of the games on this list that I didn't mention that I feel like could have been mentioned, should have been mentioned, but it's just an overall, hey, here, this is what I like about these games. You know, they're fun games. I enjoyed them, and it's great. And I'm definitely looking forward to all the great games coming out in 2023. There's so many. We get that, like, definitely just 2 big ones right now. We have Tears of the Kingdom, Legend of Zelda, and we have Final Fantasy 16. Those are 2 big hitting games right there that I'm super excited about. And that's right there too. Those are probably going to be people's #1s and #2s right there. And who knows what else we're going to have unleashed. We could have Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth come out this year, and that's be great. There's just so many possibilities of 2023, and I'm looking forward to 2023. But that's going to do it for this video, guys, of my top 10 games of 2022. Guys, if you like the video, please give that like button a click and comment down below what you like about the video, what you didn't like about the video, and let me know, guys, what were your top 10 games of 2022? Do you agree with some of the spots of my things? Do you agree with some of the things I've said about these games too? You don't have to. You can agree, like, okay, I see why you felt that way about this game, but like, it's like, oh, you felt that way about this game, but I didn't feel that way about that game, and it didn't bother me or change my experience of it, and that's totally fine too. Again, that's the great things about video games, is a lot of different opinions about them. We can all agree that video games are fun. We can all agree that video games are a great escape from reality and a great good old time no matter what. And we can all agree that we enjoy playing video games for one reason or another. You can play them because you like playing them. You can play them because you are making money with them. But as long as you're enjoying it too, as long as you're enjoying playing video games, that's all that matters at the end of the day. because that's what they're for. They're for our entertainment, they're for our enjoyment, and you couldn't ask for anything better. But anyway, guys, thank you again for watching. And again, let me know how you all felt about these games and some of the other games. Again, games I didn't mention, they will be mentioned in the other video in one way, shape, or form. They're either a game that I did play that I didn't add to the list for a reason or another, or a game that I didn't play, and obviously they wouldn't have been on this list. But again, thank you for watching this top 10 games of 2022 by yours truly. And I can't wait to see all the other games coming out in 2023 that I'm very looking forward to. And I hope you guys are too. And let me know that too. What's one of your big games that you're looking forward to coming out in 2023? Let me know. All right, guys. Thank you all for watching. And of course, I have done Let's Plays or I've done videos on some of these games on my other channel as well. And of course, any other video games that will be coming out that I'll be covering in 2023 will be played on the RPG Kingdom Kid channel, which is in a link to that channel is always in the description below of every single video. So if you want to watch any of these Let's Plays that I talked about, or any of these live streams that I talked about, or any other future live streams or past live streams / Let's Plays that I've done, it's all on that channel. Thank you all again for watching, and I'll see you guys next time in 2023.